The storm came in faster than the forecast had promised, rolling down from the ridgeline like something alive, swallowing the last gray light of afternoon before Ridge Callahan even made it back to his truck. He'd gone into town for supplies, flour, batteries, a new hinge for the woodshed door, and now the two-lane road home was disappearing under a white that seemed to erase the world, 1 mile marker at a time. By the time his headlights caught the crooked mailbox at the end of his drive, the snow was coming sideways, and the wind had a sound to it he didn't like, a low moan that pressed against the truck, like something trying to get in. He almost missed her. If the wind hadn't shifted the drift just as he turned in, if his headlights hadn't swept across the porch at exactly that angle, he would have parked, gone inside, and never known. But there she was, a shape slumped against his front door, buried nearly to the shoulder in snow, one arm flung out as though she'd been reaching for the handle when her body simply gave up. Ridge was out of the truck before he'd thought about it, boots sinking to his knees, snow stinging his face like static. He dropped beside her and pulled back the hood of her coat, and what he found nearly stopped his heart. Her lips were the color of ash, her skin so cold it didn't feel like skin at all, and her breath came so shallow he had to put his ear an inch from her mouth just to confirm it was there. Hey, can you hear me? Nothing. Her eyelids fluttered, dark lashes crusted with frost, but she didn't wake. He didn't waste time wondering who she was or how she'd ended up half buried on his porch in the middle of a mountain blizzard. He scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing, which worried him more than her stillness did, and kicked the door open with his boot, carrying her straight to the fire he'd banked that morning before leaving. He laid her on the rug closest to the hearth and worked fast, the way his grandfather had taught him decades ago, when a hunting partner had gone through river ice. Wet coat off, boots off, wool blanket, then another, tucked tight around her core. Never her limbs first warm the heart before the hands, or you kill a person trying to save them. He put a hand to her throat and found a pulse, faint, but there, ticking like a moth against glass. For the first hour, she didn't stir. Ridge fed the fire until it roared. Boiled water for a bottle. He pressed against her side, and sat in the chair across from her, with his forearms on his knees, watching her chest rise and fall, willing it to keep happening. He thought about calling for help, but one look out the window told him the answer. The storm had sealed the pass. No plow would reach them before morning, maybe not even then. Whatever was going to save her life was already in the room. Somewhere near midnight, her eyes opened. They were a pale, startled green, and for a moment they held nothing but confusion. Flicking around the unfamiliar room, the fire, the stranger's face leaning over her, Ridge kept his voice low, the way he'd talk to a spooked horse. "You're safe. You were freezing out on my porch. I got you inside." Her mouth moved. It took 3 tries before sound came out, cracked and barely audible, and Ridge had to lean in close to catch it. "Please don't. Send me back." Then her eyes rolled, and she was gone again, slipping under before he could ask what she meant, who back was, what she was running from. That would leave a woman half dead in a snowstorm rather than face it. He didn't sleep that night. He sat beside her, adding wood to the fire, checking her pulse every hour, turning her words over and over. "Don't send me back," not "help me," or "thank you," a plea born of pure fear, the kind that comes only after someone has already decided the cold outside was safer than whatever waited behind her. By morning, the storm hadn't broken, but she had stabilized. Color had crept back into her lips. When she woke fully, she flinched at the sight of him, scrambling back against the couch cushions like an animal expecting a blow. And it was that flinch, more than anything, that told Ridge everything he needed to know about the life she'd been living before she found his porch. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, staying where he was, hands visible. "You're in my cabin." "Ridge Callahan, you collapsed outside last night. I brought you in." Her name, she finally offered, was Wren Ashford. She didn't offer anything else, and Ridge didn't push. He made coffee, put bread by the fire to toast, and let the silence do what silence sometimes does better than questions. It gave her room to decide. on her own time, how much of the truth she could bear to say out loud. It came out over 3 days, because that's how long the storm kept them snowed in together. The roads impassable, the world outside reduced to white and wind. Wren had been married 2 years to a man named Cole Denner. A name, she said, like it cost her something each time. Charming in public, she said, different behind closed doors. The kind of different that started small criticism disguised as concern, control disguised as care, and grew the way frost grows on a window, so slow you don't notice, until the whole pane is white and you can't see out anymore. She told him about the night before, in fragments, an argument that had turned into something worse. She'd grabbed a coat and walked out into the storm with no plan beyond distance, only to realize, a mile into the dark, that walking might be the last decision she ever made. She'd seen the porch light through the trees, the one Ridge always left burning, and used the last of her strength to reach it. She didn't remember falling. She only remembered thinking, right before the world went dark, that if this was how it ended, at least it wouldn't be him who did it. Ridge listened without interrupting, without the false comfort of everything happens for a reason, because he'd learned long ago that people in pain don't need philosophy, they need to be believed. And he believed her, completely, the way you believe a person whose body is still showing you the bruises words tried to explain away. He didn't have answers. What he had was a working phone line to the county sheriff. Once the lines came back, a spare bedroom, and the patience to let a frightened woman decide, at her own pace, that she was allowed to stay somewhere without earning it through fear. He drove her to town himself once the roads cleared, sat with her at the shelter intake desk, and told the counselor plainly that she had a place to stay as long as she needed one, no conditions attached. What surprised him most, in the weeks that followed, wasn't how broken Wren seemed, it was how quickly. The fear in her eyes started to look less like a permanent fixture and more like a habit. She was slowly unlearning. She started sleeping through the night. She started laughing, quietly at first, at something on the radio, and then catching herself, as if laughter itself had once been forbidden. She got a job at the general store in town, small and steady, and every evening, she drove herself back up the mountain to the guest room. Ridge had never once asked her to leave. Cole came looking for her twice. The first time, Ridge met him at the end of the drive and told him, without raising his voice, that Wren wasn't there and wouldn't be discussing anything with a man who'd made her afraid of her own front door. The second time, the sheriff's cruiser was already parked in the drive when Cole pulled up, because Wren, for the first time in 2 years, had decided to file the report herself instead of swallowing the fear one more time. Spring came slow to the mountain, the way it always did. Snowmelt first, then green, pushing up through what had been frozen for months. Wren stood on the porch one evening in April, the same porch where she'd nearly died, and told Ridge that she didn't recognize the woman who'd collapsed there anymore, not because that woman was gone, but because she'd finally stopped being ashamed of her. Ridge never asked for anything in return for that first night, and Wren never forgot it. What grew between them wasn't sudden, it was porch light steady, the kind of thing built slowly by two people who had learned, in very different ways, what it cost to trust someone again. A year later, on the same spot where he'd found her buried in snow, he asked her to stay for good. She said yes before he finished the question. The whisper she'd given him that first night, "Please, don't send me back," became something they said to each other sometimes, half joking on hard days. Not because the fear was gone, but because it had finally lost its power to decide her future. What had almost ended on a stranger's porch in a snowstorm became, instead, the exact moment her life began again.